The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. We will now entertain amendments. We have 2 amendments in the drive. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll start with the one on page 3, which is, it's on the drive AB212 JSSA line 10, page 3. To amend the bill to read, basically restoring the bill to its original. Striking out the 2012 Series A refund bonds and putting in latest maturing then outstanding revenues for clarity. The final maturity of the refunding bonds may exceed the maturity of individual series of prior bonds so long as the final maturity of all then outstanding revenue bonds is not exceeded. And you know, Madam Chair and my colleagues, we just went through all the questions, and I think I already stated why I'm introducing this amendment. Thank you. I hope I get the support of my colleagues.
Thank you very much. Senator San Augustine, on the amendment, the page 3 amendment. Senator Rangel, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to object to this amendment. You know, again, my concerns are that even during the public hearing, when we spoke to GITA and we asked them, are there any bonds, like all these other bonds that we've refunded recently, do we ever extend the maturity date? The answer was no. We don't normally extend the maturity dates on these bonds because that costs more money in the long run. It's just common sense. You're getting a longer loan. So for years that you wouldn't be paying anything, now you're going to pay something because you've extended the length of the loan. So that's why the committee amended the bill, was based on the public hearing and those comments, to be able to prevent it from extending the Series 2012A bond out longer. And that's essentially what this amendment would do. If this amendment passes, it would extend the term of the bond borrowing, and we saw under extending the term of the bond borrowing, there will be over 10 years or so where we'll be paying bond payments where we wouldn't be paying had we just paid off the Series 2012A. So again, my concerns are with extending it out. It basically allows for them to go through the scenario 2, which if you look under scenario 2, under the dollar for dollar comparison, it's a negative of 24 million. In other words, 24 million in money that we're going to be paying that we wouldn't have paid had we not gone with scenario 2. Now they throw around a lot of numbers, and I know it gets confusing. It's hard for the public to track at home, but the bottom line is whether you take a look at the net present value or if you look at the dollar for dollar, either way you look at it, scenario 1 saves the most money overall. Under the dollar for dollar, it's 50-some million. Under the net present value calculation, it's 45 million. Scenario 2, under the dollar for dollar comparison, it's about 24 million in the red. It does save 15 million if you do a net present value calculation. And it might make you wonder, how do you go from being in the red to saving money? Well, it's called fancy math. And it's fancy math used by, well, that's what I call it at least, used by investors when they're trying to calculate things and trying to calculate and justify different scenarios, for example. Particularly, it's used to determine what is your dollar worth, what is saving a dollar worth to you today versus saving that same dollar later on down the line. That's the simplest way to put it. It's literally a mathematical calculation. There's literally a formula they use to determine this. And they use that so that they can calculate what's the money worth up front versus what it would be worth later on. And even with those calculations, still the one with the highest net present value is scenario 1. Even though they were able to turn a 24 in the red and the dollar for dollar into 15 million in the black under net present value, it's still scenario one that saves the most, even when calculating the net present value. So for me, either way you calculate it, one scenario saves the most money, and that's the scenario that does not extend the term of the bond borrowing. This amendment would allow them to extend the term of the bond borrowing, which again is something that we haven't done on other bonds. So with that, Madam Chair, that is why I must object to this amendment. Thank you.
Senator Rajal, there has been an objection to the amendment. Anyone wishing to speak on the amendment? Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Overall, we can argue the different scenarios that have been presented, but certainly one of the comments that Mr. Benavente said that certainly I find a bit compelling. And you know, guys, I mean, we may have different views on this, but you know, John Benavente has been at the helm of GPA for a very, very long time, and is very knowledgeable with regards to needs and operations. I mean, he's the longest serving general manager in the history of the government of Guam, so I don't think in his senior years, probably winding up his time at GPA, he's going to want to put the Guam Power Authority in a compromising situation. There's nothing to prevent the need, if there is going to be more cost or rate increases down the road, for GPA not to want to go out and do a separate bond financing outside of this one. Certainly looking at favorable terms and interest rates and the opportunity to take advantage of it at this time, I think is very, very important, and we should pursue that. He also made another critical statement that I appreciated him elaborating on, is why do the savings now up front in the next few years, as he reiterated, for the next 10 years, is because the current customer base is the one that will benefit from it. After that long term, he's anticipating, and again, I mean, that is the hope. All kinds of things can happen down the road. I mean, there's no guarantee about anything in life. But the opportunity that there'll be other rate pairs that will be added to the market that will help carry the load and be able to contribute to the increased cost of operation. We're going through a very critical time with the transition of the Guam Power Authority. From going off these old baseload generators that we've been relying on most of our lifetime to the opportunity of a new fiscal plant that's going to encourage other types of alternative energies to hopefully make power producing on Guam more efficient and more sustaining, and to a certain degree, environmentally more compatible with the future of what we'd like to see. I think those are all very important points, and that's a major undertaking. You know, it's easy for us to criticize because we're not carrying the load. We're not actually having to do the work that's involved in that transition. That's a major transition of what's coming, and hopefully a better and more reliable system than what we've had. Certainly just a few weeks ago, we heard the situation, another incident down at Cabras. Those plants need to be put to rest. They're very expensive, they're inefficient, the quality of fuel that we're having to use to operate them is something that we'd like to see as part of the past. And as we're looking towards the future, we want to see a more efficient plant. And I think the scenario, while challenging, yes, it's going to cost a little more in the long term. If we have a bigger customer base to absorb that, as anticipated with the growth on the island, then at least that offsets it for the current customer base, which is in most cases the average resident. Right now, it's the average resident carrying the load. It's not the hotels. The hotels are empty down in Tumon. It's the people of Guam, the average resident out there, that's having to pay their bill. And while, yes, the amount of savings at this point is nominal, at least they're looking at how they can minimize the increases that we otherwise would be having to be burdened with. So certainly in the front end of seeing reduced costs to our consumers out there that are carrying the load, I'm more favorable to that. And down the road, 10 years from now, it's the hope that we will have a greater customer base. And some may argue, well, that's maybe the case, maybe not, but that's life. Sometimes you have to take that chance and opportunity, and I think it's a responsible thing to do at this point. I think we should be supportive of the Guam Power Authority. They've come a long way. They've definitely come a long way with regards to their management and operations, and I think we should help them get through this process so that they can get the new plant constructed, and more importantly, take advantage of the rate opportunities that are available right now that may not be there in the next few months or in the next few years. Obviously, its challenges in the world economy continue to change. So with that, Madam Chair, I'm supportive of this amendment that's been put forth with Senator St. Augustine, and I think we should step up to the plate. I think we should support the Guam Power Authority and the men and women every day that work very hard to make sure that we have the comforts that we have with power here in our community. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this amendment.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. On the amendment, Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to state that the legislature passing the bill as it is absolutely being supportive of GPA. It's allowing refinancing. It's allowing them to save $45 million. The bill as is, without the amendment. It's supporting GPA, and nothing in this bill is building us that power plant that's going up in Upper Tumon. That's being built. That was already, the deal was done prior to this. There was some discussion talking about new power plant, and I think we got, intertwined talking about the proposal down for Pt.2 for that new power plant, where we have to waive the law in order to allow them to build it near the school. That's totally different. The big power plant with the reduced fuel costs is going to be built with or without this financing. And the financing as being proposed out of the committee is going to save ratepayers, all ratepayers, $45 million, as opposed to saving some ratepayers, some, and letting the other ratepayers pay the balance. They weren't very clear with us as to, we have a chart here from their consultants, they say, that tell us that without financing, the base rate was going to go up. With financing, the base rate's going to go up. The difference between the two would be $2 a month, $24 a year. But they didn't tell us, with the financing in this proposal, what that difference might be. So it's going to be somewhere between $0 and $2, right? That's the difference that we're talking about between the two financings on a consumer, which is a big thing, because when you talk about we're going to save consumers $10 million, no, you're going to save them $2. And that is significant if you add it up. I have to admit that $24 is a big savings in a power bill. So hopefully we're going to achieve that with this financing. And that's what the legislature will be authorizing if we pass the bill as is. So I just want to put on the record that I take exception to any statements that say we are not supporting GPA. We are absolutely supporting GPA. They're building that power plant because of what we passed previously. They might be building one in the future. If that bill passes, I don't know. But this financing to save them potentially $45 million versus $15 million, I would hope is a huge support for GPA and ratepayers as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Situas Masi, Madam Speaker, on the amendment, there's been an objection. Senator St. Augustine, would you like to close?
Close on the amendment. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. My colleagues, we all talk about our savings, but we keep forgetting that if you look at the charts that everybody has been looking at, I made it very clear during the open questioning. Let's do the math. 45 million versus almost $90 million savings on the first 10 years. And with the increase and the improvement of sales and power plants and additional customers and everything, the savings will just keep going up. And if you take a look at those funds and you just pass it down we end up with no increases, no threat of power rate increase. The options are there. They've asked that number one, PUC is going to decide this after this bill passes. As we state, they've asked to change the amendment that was put on. They objected to the amendment. This amendment changes it back to the original intent. And with that, I ask my colleagues to support the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sitio Masi, Senator San Augustine. There has been an objection to the amendment. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Amendment passes. Senator San Augustine, you are still recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have another amendment. It's found on the drive AB 212 JSSA line 19-22 P4COTW. Basically to line out, to delete letter H and just change the lettering of I to H. And with that, this amendment, my colleague, is being proffered at the request of GPA and GITA in order to ensure that, again, the best possible market outcomes are achieved when going to the bond market. The net present value is not the best gauge in determining the best value when going to market. We heard that GPA has on how the scenarios will affect the future of GPA and ultimately the ratepayers. This amendment does not tie the hand of PUC. PUC gets to look at all three scenarios. We need to give them the opportunity to look at it and not just tell them, this is the scenario you look at, nothing more. PUC decides. And with that, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. On the amendment, to page 4, Senator Rangel, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to object to this amendment as well. Again, this is the amendment to page 4, line 19 through 22, correct? That we're on?
Yes, you're
So-
correct. We are on line 19 to 22, page 4.
What this amendment does is it completely strikes out H. And all H says is that the debt service payments of the refunding bonds shall be restructured to provide the greatest possible net present value savings on the aggregate debt service of the 2012 Series A revenue bonds to the ratepayers and the Guam Power Authority. Restructured to provide the greatest possible net present value savings. Why wouldn't we want the greatest possible net present value savings? That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Rangel. On the amendment, Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think ultimately, obviously, we would want to see that. And I'm sure the PUC, Madam Chair, who's been entrusted and created by law to essentially review these rate cases before them, are going to review and look at what the best case scenario is. I mean, publicly, they're also accountable for their actions. I mean, these are open discussions that they review. I mean, it's one of the main reasons we put the utilities under the PUC rather than having the Guam Legislature, as it used to, decide what the power rates were and the water rates were, and that certainly helped drive these utilities into the ground. So I'm fairly confident. I don't have any reason of late or in the last few years to think that the PUC's acted irresponsibly with regards to looking at these rate issues and rate reviews for our utility agencies out there. So I don't have a problem with them looking at what the best scenario is. None of us collectively in this room are going to go into the details of what's going to be involved in looking at this and with regards to the financing, what's the main options that would be available and the best options that would be available for the Guam Power Authority. I'm fairly confident that they'll be able to come to a good consensus that will be in the best interest of the ratepayers in our community. So I stand in support of this amendment, and I'm fairly confident the PUC will be able to address, as I mentioned, the best option. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Senator Titagui.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have a question to the author of the amendment.
Please state your question.
So does this mean that after they've decided which scenario, 1, 2, or 3, that they have to provide us? So it sounds like they're already have decided, and then they give us a report on which one they take, or is it still negotiable between PUC and Guam Power Authority to discuss which scenario to go with first? Yeah.
Senator
Yes.
Sinogstein, do you yield to the question?
Number one, my understanding, yes, Madam Chair. My understanding of PUC, any rates, any discussion brought to PUC, they invite all of us. They invite the people of Guam. All we have to do is if we wanted to pursue scenario 1, all we have to do is convince PUC that's the best route to go. PUC is going to determine which is the best route and recommend the following. There's nothing set in stone. All this does is make sure that PUC decides. PUC has always looked at the benefit of the people of Guam. I haven't heard anything different. Thank you. I hope that answers it. Nothing is
Yes.
set in stone. Thank you.
Senator Titlegy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, that answers my question. So it's still with this legislation, even though they struck out age, of course, we all want what's the best savings for the people of Guam, the taxpayers. So people who are listening today, I'm probably sure they're scratching their head as to why would it not be in the best interest of the people, or the lowest cost for the people of Guam. But to know that PUC is going to be involved, and it's not just going to be the decision of GPA to make the decision on which scenario they go to, then they will have to answer. Both of these agencies will have to answer to the people of Guam. Thank you.
So Dismasi, Senator Titlegy, on the amendment. Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I oppose the amendment because I like to put the burden, this bill is before the legislature and not the PUC for a reason, and that's, to look at the overall finances of the government, what we're borrowing. And really, in the guise of refunding, we're authorizing additional borrowing for GPA. And by removing this provision that requires them, we're allowing them, by that last amendment, to extend the term beyond the current term of this 2012 bond. We're extending it longer. We're changing the amounts. We're going to pay, by this amendment, looks like $45 million more in the long run. And that's to get some money up front. And so I don't know what PUC is going to do with it, but I would just ask us as senators in our role to require, as we have with our previous financing, that if the goal of it is to save overall on the financing, the debt service, what we're going to pay in debt service, we can save $45 million versus saving only $15 million in the long run. That we should save in the long run. And we can find other ways to take care of those in the short run, including perhaps ARP money, if that's available. Perhaps the other savings, perhaps, watch the salary increases, things like that. But in the long run, 45 versus 15 is it's just very hard. It's compelling, I feel. And that, that's why this is before us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker. On the amendment, there's been an objection. Senator Sinogstein, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My colleagues, you're right. It was very compelling, the 45. But when I asked on the last round of questions. Let's do the math. Wow, 90 million. That's compelling, not 45, 90 million. Plus the additional savings from the new power plant, and the upgrade to power plants, the renewables, all the scenarios is compelling. And with that, I ask my colleagues to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator San Augustine. There has been an objection to the amendment. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Amendment passes. We have one amendment left in the drive. Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you. My amendment is for line 23, page 4. This is subsection I. Subsection I currently says that within 90 days, GPA and the PUC shall notify the legislature of their intent and plan regarding the annual debt service, regarding the savings achieved from the refinancing. In other words, they haven't shown us their plan for use of the savings that they will be achieving by our allowing them to refinance. And this requires them to show us a plan. I'm amending subsection I to add that just to specify when we say the word savings, that it is the annual debt service payment savings. So that annual savings, so that that they're going to achieve every year. That's the plan that they show us. And also, I'm adding in, this is similar to an amendment. This subsection I was an amendment I put into a prior refinancing for GPA in particular. And so in compliance with the previous section like this, they gave us a plan that told us that they used the money to study DOE and they put some money into rebates on some equipment. In other words, like if you buy certain type of air conditioner, I think that's what that program was, that they would give you a rebate on it. So they put some of the savings into that program. So it may ultimately affect ratepayers, but reducing DOE's bill immediately doesn't affect any ratepayers' bill. It affects government spending overall, but it does not affect the ratepayers' bill. The ratepayers are still going to subsidize the power. So my amendment is just to add to this section that was in previous financing bill to say savings in annual debt service payments from refunding shall be utilized specifically for the direct benefit of the residential ratepayers. And it's pretty much to add that word direct benefit. And so I'm hoping that when we say direct benefit, we'll get something more translatable into ratepayers' tax, ratepayers' bill, their bills. So I hope that adequately explains it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Speaker Terlahi. Senator San Augustine, followed by Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I stand in objection, and I'm just going to explain each part. Number one, first part, residential ratepayers. That affects me, but it also affects everybody in the business that pays. So only when you live at the house, but when you're going to go to the restaurant or go to the stores, prices of items there go up because why? They have to pay the rate, the increase. GPA does not work for or do not service one type of folk. They service everybody on the island. All the rates need to be changed. All the savings should be achieved by everybody. Residential ratepayers, no problem. But how about the business? That's why I object to that part. On the other part, annual debt service, it's already in the bill of their intent and plan regarding the savings achieved from the refinancing. So I'm trying to understand, maybe the author of the amendment can explain that annual debt service payment. They're gonna give their intent and plan regarding the savings achieved from the refinancing. So with that, the first part, I really object now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Snodgrass. On the amendment, Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, it's not a matter of point of raising an objection. It's probably the author can yield to a question with regard to specifically for the direct benefit. You know, that language in itself can be subjective. And, you know, and subjective in the point of who's going to make that determination as to whether or not that is a direct benefit. I agree in spirit to what she's saying. It's just, it's what is that direct benefit? Okay, so you know, if the author can yield in as far as what her thought processes was towards that, that could help me to better understand that language. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Snodgrass. Do you yield to the question?
Actually, that's to the author.
Oh, excuse me. I mean, Speaker Terlahi.
Thank you. I definitely understand that direct benefit is not an exact direction to them, right? But, you know, they're supposed to come back to us with a plan. And without saying direct benefit to residential ratepayers, they may come back to us with a plan to use this again to save the legislature money, to save, you know, who knows who money. When really what they've been before us saying is that this is going to save ratepayers. And if they're going to save ratepayers, they will save business ratepayers as well. But I want to see what direct benefit residential ratepayers are going to achieve. It was residential ratepayers that they did an analysis on. This was them paying their consultants to do that analysis that they provided to us to show, you know, that residential ratepayers would save $2. So I want, you know, I just want to be specific, because the last time when we weren't even this specific, they came back and told us how DOE might save money on power, but they did not use that money, that savings at all for the benefit of the ratepayers. So, you know, I don't want to be more specific than that, because I do want to give them some flexibility, but I just want to continue to remind them that they were here telling us they're going to benefit these ratepayers. They did their analysis on residential ratepayers. And so I want them to, you know, just continue to honor that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, you know, Madam Chair, I appreciate at least the attempt to be able to try to explain this. I understand the spirit of this. And I need to go back to the concern that was raised by the good senator from Jigo here, and that specifically for the direct benefit of residential ratepayers. Now, here's the problem with the use of residential ratepayers. I don't think condos and townhomes are resident or apartments are classified in that same. So if we do that specifically, you may inadvertently and inconsequentially remove or delete some other individuals that may benefit from this as well, because there is a difference in the rates. Again, I don't want to lose, and I understand the spirit of those brought by the author, but I have to also agree with Senator St. Augustine, and as far as keeping it that specific, especially in the area of residential. And I don't want to get into this tit for tat on that, because at the end of the day, if you get a power bill, you get a power bill, whether you're a resident, a business, a homeowner, apartment dweller, okay, or Guam. So if there's going to be a direct benefit in as far as savings, I would like to see it for ratepayers. So maybe what I'd like to be able to do right now is to amend this amendment to basically strike out the word residential and just say specifically the benefit of ratepayers.
There has been an amendment to the amendment. We will take a brief recess to put it in writing.
Strike it out.
We are back from recess. So Senator Blas, please repeat your amendment.
Very simple amendment, Madam Chair. It's just basically to strike out the word residential.
Okay. There's been an amendment offered to strike out the word residential. Is there an objection? Speaker Terlahi.
I very much understand the intent of that amendment, and normally I wouldn't object because it's the same intent, right? Exactly the same. However, it's only because of GPA's response to our last requirement that they benefit ratepayers. They came back and benefited only DOE, not any residential ratepayers. So I'm not trying to restrict who they benefit, but I am trying to ensure that when they came in here and said we're going to give $10 million in savings to ratepayers, they meant residential ratepayers, and I think we should hold them to it. And that's really all. Otherwise, you know, I wouldn't quibble about the language, and I do respect the intent. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. There's been an objection to the amendment. Senator Blas, would you like to close?
No, I'm not objecting.
Excuse me.
there's no
There
objection?
has not been an objection.
Okay,
no.
so-
On the amendment to the amendment. Okay, hearing no objections. Amendment to the amendment passes. We are still on the main amendment. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Madam Chair, because I made the objection to the amendment before it became amended, I now withdraw my amendment because it's not just residential, it's everyone gets to get a direct benefit. Thank
You
you.
withdraw your objection.
That's correct. And I support now the amendment as amended.
Thank you very much, Senator San Augustine. On the amendment as amended, Senator Titlegy, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I stand in full support of this amendment. I'm not quite sure, though, the author of the legislation, not the amendment, the author, bringing up 90 million, constantly. I mean, the only thing that I did the math, and spoke with Gita about what the savings would be in scenario number 1, at 45, and then scenario number 2, in money-wise, it would actually cost us $3 million, and then, of course, scenario 3, it would cost the taxpayers, well, your grandchildren, maybe about 17, or not even your but your children as they get older, $17 million. I'm not sure what it is, but, to think that maybe whatever he's saying about 90 million, well, I'm hoping that does go to the ratepayers of this island and that savings. And I truly believe by scratching out residential, you also take care of an issue that several condominiums have been charged at commercial rates and not residential rates because of the way it was set up. And nowadays, you're seeing more and more people moving into condominiums or even apartments, but mostly condominiums where the GPA has been charging commercial rates. And we went through that whole scenario. So I stand in full support of this amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Titlegy. On the amendment, Senator Rangel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I stand in support of the amendment as amended. I even support the original amendment prior to being amended. But I support the amendment because, we got to do everything we can to keep the Power Authority focused on benefiting ratepayers. And I say that because, our ratepayers are struggling to pay their power bills. Just Ask anyone. The rates just went up. People are complaining. They're constantly posting about power bills going up. We get phone calls all the time about people upset about their power bills, which is another issue because people think it's the senators, the legislature, and the governor who's responsible for power bills, but we keep being told that we're not. We're being told to stay out of it. Mind your business. Let the PUC do it. Let the CCU handle this. We're the experts. Let the PUC do it. Until it's time for them to borrow money, then they come before us and say, oh, we need the authority to borrow money. So you don't need us, but now you need us. And now we better do it or else it's going to be bad for the ratepayers. That's what they keep saying. That's why I was asking about the $15 million in ARP money, because they said they needed $15 million in ARP money to prevent raising the LEAC or raising rates. So the governor gave them $15 million in ARP money, and they still raised the rates. So I'm just very concerned about the ratepayers, and I want to be sure that any savings that are realized go to the direct benefit of ratepayers and not to the benefit of hiring some other consultants, hiring some other companies, or finding ways to pay multi-billion-dollar contracts to giant corporations. That's why I think this amendment's important. And that's why I think it's important that we hold them as accountable as possible, because utility rates have a trickle-down effect on everything. It increases the cost of living, it increases the cost of goods anytime utility rates go up. And right now, our power rates, I don't have the information in front of me, but the last time I looked at it, our power rates are amongst the highest in the nation. So we absolutely must require them to utilize any annual debt service payments for the benefit of the ratepayers and not for the benefit of carpetbaggers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rogel. On the amendment, hearing no objections. Oh, on the amendment, Speaker Terlahi.
Thank you. I'll just be very brief, but I want to thank my colleagues for support of this amendment. It is important that we take care of ratepayers, especially because ratepayers are the ones on the hook for this borrowing. They were on the hook since 2012, and when we increase the borrowing, they will be on the hook beyond us, beyond our 10 years. It's going to go up after 10 years. Someone else, if we're not paying that in 10 years, they're going to pay that. That's our children. The senator's right. And the last time, I heard about borrowing, it was, we don't want to increase putting burden and debt on the back of our children and their grandchildren. We didn't want to do that as a matter of policy. So I do hope that they will use this for the benefit of ratepayers, as they have implied here today, but we have no plan in front of us to show that as real proof. We are reliant on, them to do that. We want to not remove anyone who might benefit, but ensure that ratepayers will benefit for sure. Not raises for management, not any other costs that they might incur or decide that they have enough money now to incur, but that benefit, direct benefit for ratepayers. So I thank you again for support of this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Speaker Terlahi. Hearing no objections, amendment passes. Amendment as amended passes. That is the last amendment in the drive. Senator San Augustine, would you like to close?
Thank you. No, other than to ask my colleagues to support the bill, 212-36 CR, but I like to also move, and then now I can go ahead and make the motion to move that Bill 212-36 CR as amended by the Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, Power and Energy Utilities, and the Arts, and amended in the Committee of the Whole, with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to be placed on the third reading file.
On the motion. Hearing no objections, motion passes. Senator San Augustine.
I don't know if it'll be appropriate, but would have to rise if I'm correct. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to rise from the Committee of the Whole with the recommendation that Bill number 212, and the reason why we need to rise is because this Committee of the Whole is under Senator Clint. Tomorrow's Committee of the Whole would be under the Appropriations, two different Committee of the Wholes. That's the only reason why. It's just for this purpose.
I understand. It's
All right?
from a different committee.
With the recommendation that Bill 212-36 CR as amended by the Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, Power and Energy Utilities, and the Arts, and amended in the Committee of the Whole be placed on the third reading file.
On the motion to rise with the recommendation to place the bill in the third reading file, hearing no objections.
We are back from Committee of the Whole. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to resolve into the, correction. I think that Senator Clinton would have to report out the Committee of the Whole results, because this was your committee, sir.
Senator Rangel, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to rise from the Committee of the Whole with the recommendation that Bill number 212-36 COR is amended by the Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, Power and Energy Utilities, and the Arts, and amended in the Committee of the Whole, be sent to the third reading file. Be sent to the voting file. No,
Senator Rangel.
so, yeah, I made the motion to move that Bill 212-36 as amended by the Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, Power and Energy Utilities, and the Arts, and amended in the Committee of the Whole with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to be placed into the third reading file.
Yes, Senator Rajel, on your motion to place Bill 12-36 COR as amended by the committee and further amended by the Committee of the Whole, with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole. On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, at this point I move to resolve into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of deliberating. I have several bills here, but I'm gonna identify the order that we will hear them tomorrow. We'll begin with Bill number 202-36, which was introduced by Senator Mary Torres, as amended by the Committee on General Government Operation and Appropriation. And then it'll be followed by Bill 170, which is the Guma bill, introduced by Senator Blas. Then followed by the 172, introduced by myself. That's the FQ Sanchez Almatak bill. Then we will proceed to Bill 227, which is the SERV Act bill. And my colleagues, just to let you know that tomorrow morning, I have already communicated with DOA and Revenue and Tax to be here for the 202, which it impacts. And I'll just ask the same group to stay for the remaining of the day. And then we can move from there, because those are the folks that will be impacted.
On that motion, Senator Taitakwi.
Just a point of inquiry, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, if BBMR is going to also be present as well as DOE?
Will they,
BBMR?
Yes, I apologize. I did extend it to BBMR, but at the minimum, DOA will be here. I hope BBMR shows up.
and
I agree with you,
DRT,
Senator
and
Talley.
revenue and taxation, you said.
Revenue and taxes for first thing in the morning. And also during the SERV Act, I will be extending the invitation also to the Veterans Administration and the folks that it impacts in that, on that bill, on
All right.
227.
So on the motion, notwithstanding the House rules, to resolve into the Committee of the Whole for the purposes of the bills as stated by Senator San Augustine, note that all of these bills are as amended by the committees, that version, and it's been, those versions have been uploaded by the clerk. On that motion, to resolve into the Committee of the Whole at 9 a.m. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We are recessed until 9 a.m.